Hello, I'm Ava Sky Barton, Christian School Management Multimedia Producer. Welcome to the CSM studio. I had the pleasure today of interviewing Dr. Deborah Miller, Northwest Regional Director for the Association of Christian Schools International. We're glad to have you here. Dr. Miller, thank you for coming on CSM's Christian Educator Series. This series will provide insight into issues in Christian education today. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Would you start by telling us a little bit about your own educational journey?
Sure. Well, I knew in third grade that I wanted to be a teacher. I think mostly it was because I was enamored by all this stuff on the teacher's desk, right? So she had her tape dispenser and her stapler and her pens and pencils and her 3-hole punch, and I just wanted all that stuff. It looked so neat. And so not for the noblest of reasons, but the desire was there. After I graduated from high school, I went to George Fox University and I majored in social studies education. So I got my bachelor's and then went right into education. I taught 8th grade social studies at a public school for about 3 years. And then due to the tragic loss of a student, actually, that precipitated my movement into private education. And during that time, I got my master's degree in education and then went on to start a Christian school. And during that time, I earned my doctorate in education also at George Fox University. From there, I was working with my husband leading Vancouver Christian High School, the school we founded, and I transitioned to Multnomah Bible College, where I was hired to found and then run a teacher education program. So then after serving there for around 9 years, I moved on to become a head of school at a large Christian high school in the area. And from there, I became the regional director at ACSI, the position I hold today. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
What made you want to get into leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I can't say that I ever consciously chose to get into leadership. A few years back, I was creating a chronology of my life experiences, and I realized that starting in high school, I was tapped to take leadership positions, both at school and in the workplace. And I went on to look at that chronology and move it even farther into my adult life, and I realized that even through college and beyond, I sort of fell into leadership roles. I believe that's because I have both natural and spiritual giftings of leadership, sort of like it says in Romans 12. I'm not suggesting that I've always operated in those leadership giftings perfectly or well, but I do believe that even though I've made a lot of mistakes and had to learn how to lead well, that it was really, being a leader is something more that I am than something that I do. It's beyond a title or a role or a job description. I think it's part of my DNA. So again, I don't think it's something that I really got into as much as just who I am.
Sheryl Sandberg wrote Lean In to talk about the challenges that women face in leadership roles. Do you find that you have to lean in Christian school leadership?
Yes and no. I've spent really my entire career in conservative Christian evangelical circles. So I've had my share of opportunities to have to ask myself the question if I'm being treated a certain way due to my being a woman. And honestly, I've never liked thinking it could be that. But in some situations, after you've explored every other option, there are really no other valid explanations other than just really the gender issue. One example, when I was serving in a leadership role as the only woman on a leadership team, I remember being in a high-level leadership meeting, and a colleague responded to a statement that I had made that was sort of pushing back on a statement he had made, and he just basically said, well, we don't have to listen to you, you're menopausal. I'm sad to say that I really had no response. Like, I was speechless, which is not a condition I find myself in very often. So from that sort of extreme example to, lots of stories about microaggressions or just conversations where stereotypical language or examples or stories are told or used. I would say, yes, I think I've had to face some of the circumstances. But as women, we really have to balance overlooking an offense, which Scripture admonishes us to do, but also calling out stereotypical behavior or even discrimination. So going back to your initial question about leaning in and how have I perhaps had to do that in Christian education circles, I would say that there are times, well, my version of leaning in has been to intentionally lower both the tone and the volume of my voice when I'm in meetings, and to use rational and well-informed arguments and presentations and try to have them devoid of filler words. I try to avoid using the term feel or to make an emotional appeal when I'm trying to state a case for something, because those things tend to be attributed to your gender rather than just your personality, unfortunately. So, when I deal with boards or I'm in meetings with kind of high power, high profile men, I'll try to regulate my behaviors in those ways so as to come across sort of gender free, which is unfortunately something that you need to do sometimes when you're a woman in leadership. However, I will say this, in dealing with the general public, I really feel like as a woman in leadership, I have been well accepted. I think if you listen well, I think if you offer plausible solutions, I think if you follow through, I think if you communicate well, that you are respected, you're appreciated, and you're even admired. And so I would say at the end of the day, if you serve people well, they don't care what sex you are.
Now let's talk about Christian schools specifically. Will you tell us about the schools in the Northwest? Where are they and how large are they?
Yeah, so there are around 150 ACSI Christian schools in the Pacific Northwest region, which is comprised of 5 states. So Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Idaho, and Montana. And so in Alaska, Idaho, and Montana, there are around 40 schools. So you can obviously tell them that the bulk of the schools are in Oregon and Washington, and then most of the schools in Oregon and Washington fall along the I-5 corridor. So let's see, there's 5 schools that are well over 1,000 students. They're actually like a school system. And then there's 15 schools that are over 300. There's another 48 that are between 100 and 200. And then there's about 50 schools that have enrollment less than 100. So one of the uniquenesses of the Northwest region is they were actually the largest geographical space of the 8 regions in the United States. And so we have vast amounts of wilderness that other regions don't have. I think some of the work right now that's being done in Christian schools that are in those remote areas is nothing short of heroic. The quality of education being delivered in some of these really tiny schools with just a handful of students because of the sacrifices of teachers and leaders in those areas.
Society is becoming more secular. Barna research shows that future parents are more interested in success than in religion. How do Christian schools deal with this?
Yeah. Well, I think, if we believe, as Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, that God has set eternity in the hearts of men, and if we believe that we're made imago Dei in the image of God, then I think by faith we can try to shape the narrative in ways that balance these cultural mores with biblical truth. So I think while acknowledging and addressing these current cultural realities, I think we need to really aggressively redefine success from a Christian perspective, a biblical perspective, while using secular data to make the case that Christian schools actually produce more successful graduates than secular schools. For example, our culture is increasingly defining success as living a balanced lifestyle. Well, I think it's easy to make a case that Christians who follow biblical mandates related to work-life balance are more successful at having balanced lives, reflected by simpler living, being less materialistic, not being workaholics, etc. Similar, I think there's an awakened public commitment to, or conscience to, serving the common good. That's a phrase that you hear more often now, and in general, right? So not just in Christian circles, but broadly in society. So I found some information, some research from the 2017 Cardis study that I wanted to share. So let me just share this with you. So the 2017 Cardis study provided evidence of how Christian school graduates are embracing the call to serve and to give. ACSI wrote a response paper to those findings, and in that response paper they said this, quote, "Another distinctive of Protestant Christian school graduates is their tendency to choose careers on the basis of their religious calling and to place less importance on compensation. These students average lower household incomes, yet they give more of their time and their finances to their churches and their communities than their peers do. In general, Protestant Christian school graduates give almost 5 times more money to their churches and about 7 times more to other religious causes than any other group does. Those are Christian school graduates. They also give significantly more time, volunteering more hours in their churches, and about the same number of hours doing other opportunities. So I guess those are just examples of how we can take secular definitions of success and show how they're being met through adherence to biblical values. So again, it's redefining the definition and phrasing it in our terms.
Are Christian schools growing or declining in your region?
Yes. So the answer is yes. Some schools are experiencing exponential growth, like 20% or higher year over year, which is phenomenal. And yet there's other schools who are struggling to maintain their enrollment, even to the point of potentially having to possibly close. But overall, I think Christian schools are healthier and stronger than they've been. I think there's several reasons for that. I think part of that is due to the economic upturn, right? So we're several years out of the Great Recession now, and I think it's being seen in Christian school enrollment. I also think that just funding in general in public schools causes some parents to see private Christian school as a better option because there's just so much turmoil surrounding funding in the public school structure.
What are the 2 greatest challenges in your schools?
I think the first one is just establishing their own unique footprint, understanding their niche and not trying to be the Christianized version of the neighborhood public school. We're rarely going to be funded to the degree public schools are, so we've got to be smart about resource allocation. The second challenge, I think, is in just not attending to our primary advantage that we have in Christian schools, which is the opportunity to engage in overt spiritual formation. We have to be about that. It is, again, our one distinctive. And so we need to be really intentional about doing that well and letting parents know the impact we're having on the spiritual formation of their students.
From your experience as a leader, how do you exercise leadership? What does it look like, and how would you advise a young leader today?
Well, I exercise leadership carefully and prayerfully with an ever-increasing sense of humility and gravitas, I would say, because the older I get, I know that leadership decisions have far-reaching implications, and the higher you rise in an organization, the more potential there is for both positive and negative impact. So leadership for me looks like endeavoring to be wise, informed, thoughtful, decisive, courageous, winsome, and really being laser focused on mission. I think the best advice I could give to young leaders is to find mentors, whether those are in formal or informal settings, whether that's people they can connect with once a week or once a month or once a quarter or even once a year. Find people you admire that are doing what you aspire to do really, really well, and then reach out to them and seek their counsel, their advice, their guidance, their input, and do it really humbly and really gratefully, and let them speak into your life. I would also say to aspiring leaders to have faith. You know, God is the God of Christian education, and as challenging as a setting as it is as a setting, God is in it, and it is really rewarding. So they shouldn't shy away from embracing a call to Christian education. It'll be some of the best work they ever do.
Is going into Christian education a good career choice?
Yeah, so I just spoke to that a little bit, but I'll just add to my answer by saying this. I think it's a really interesting question because I think any good career choice is one where you've listened to the voice of God and you're simply obeying. When you do that, it becomes less about career and just about walking out obediently your relationship to Christ, right? So if God calls you into Christian education, just go. Serve faithfully in that arena until the pillar of light or fire moves on, and then follow it. So, God is going to meet your every need. If you choose to go into Christian education, He will meet your needs financially, professionally, missionally, in every way.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your perspective with us today. And thank you for joining us at CSM Studio. We hope to see you again.